In 2001, the World Health Organization said that stigma is the #1 barrier to people accessing professional help and getting the help they need when it comes to overcoming mental health challenges. And I believe that drug and alcohol addiction is one of the final frontiers when it comes to stigma around mental health. Our next presenters will be speaking about how to build stronger and more connected communities and how to break down stigma. Natasa Zekanovic, I pronounced that correctly. Yes, finally got there on day 2. Has worked as a community and projects and partnerships officer at Fairfield City Council for the past 2 years, has been a co-convener for Fairfield CDAT and has worked in the AOD space for over 4 years. Nathaly Parish is the Multicultural Community Liaison Officer with Fairfield Police. She has been so for the past 5 years. Prior to that, she was with Youth Off the Streets, and her whole tenure working in the field spans 12 years. She has been a co-convener with Fairfield CDAT for the past 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Natasa Zekanovic and Nathaly Parish.
Thank you everyone for having us here today, and thank you to Gail as well for inviting us to present. So Nathaly and I are going to take you through our journey for the Leading Stronger and Connected Communities program, which was funded by the Alcohol and Drug Foundation as part of their local drug action team program. So Nathaly and I, we both co-convened the Fairfield Community Drug Action Team and the Fairfield Local Drug Action Team. I'd also like to acknowledge Susan, who's one of the Multicultural Community Liaison Officers at Fairfield City Police, who's also an LDAT member and a CDAT member, and just everywhere. So we are aware that it is past lunch, and we're gonna try to finish a little bit early, but we do have an interactive activity a little bit later on. So just before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land we are on which we meet, and pay respect to the elders, families, and ancestors. So we'll take you through the introduction to the toolkit. So we've got some hard copies as well, which we'll hand around. So basically, I'll run through a little bit around the funding of the local drug action team and how we developed this resource toolkit, and we're now at the final stages of evaluating the toolkit. So the first grant we received was in late 2018, so it has been a few years. The project was impacted by COVID, so it wasn't meant to be as long as it's been. So we received $10,000 from the Alcohol and Drug Foundation, and most of those funds went to employing a project officer. That was actually me at the time, so this project does hold a soft spot for me because I've kind of been involved in it from the get-go, and it's been amazing to see it come to life also post-COVID. So we basically established a local drug action team, and the CDAT was really crucial to this part because we're able to use the existing networks that we had within the CDAT and tap into a lot of the organisations we already had to then establish the local drug action team. And we basically came up with the idea to work with our community and faith leaders. Often within Fairfield, they're often the first point of contact for a lot of families when they have an issue. So we wanted to build their capacity around how do you have conversations around drug and alcohol, and also find out what the barriers were for them in supporting their communities. Then the second grant we received was in 2019, and a lot of these funds did go to employing a project officer as well, as within the committee we didn't have the capacity to have someone really kind of lead the project, and we decided to develop a resource toolkit, but this emerged from consultations we had with the community and community and faith leaders. The third grant we received was $29,000 in 2021, and this was really the implementation of the resource toolkit. So the training of both community and faith leaders and community frontline workers on how to use the toolkit. But throughout the whole process, we did work with community and faith leaders to really pilot the resource toolkit. Was it working for their communities? What could we improve? And we finally implemented that post-COVID. And yeah, we're in the final stages of evaluating that resource toolkit, so we'll be able to share that a little bit later on as well. So in terms of who's on our Fairfield Local Drug Action Team, so as mentioned, the Alcohol and Drug Foundation is the funding body. We had Community First Step, New South Wales Police, so Fairfield City Police Area Command, STARTS, Department of Communities and Justice, Family Drug Support, Southwest Sydney Local Health District, and Fairfield City Council. So in terms of the background and aims of the project, I will just provide some demographic information around Fairfield. It is a really, if anyone's been to Fairfield, it's a really unique area. So we've got about 70% of the population who speak a second language. Our top 5 countries of birth are Vietnam, Iraq, Cambodia, China, and Italy. In terms of the top 5 languages spoken, English, Vietnamese, Arabic, Assyrian, and Cantonese. And the new census data is out today, so we're very excited to see how that's also changed. In terms of the background and aims of the project, so we really focused on building the capacity, knowledge, and also the confidence of community and faith leaders in Fairfield LGA to work towards preventing alcohol and other drug-related harms. I'll now hand over to Nathaly, who's going to talk a little bit about the consultation process and the main findings.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I guess the key thing about this project was really around code design and working really closely with our community leaders and frontline workers in the development and the implementation of it. So in 2019, we held a forum consultation at Fairfield RSL. We had, would have been about 80 community leaders attend. We had over 30 different types of cultural and religious groups attend. We also we did some surveys, we had some conversations, but the resounding theme to emerge from the consultations and the interviews with our community leaders was the prevalence of stigma and judgment around the use of alcohol and other drugs. So it was really confirming what a lot of us already know, that stigma is one of them, and fear of judgment is one of the main barriers to seeking help when it comes to drugs and alcohol. So this resource was then developed after the consultation. We went back, we had a look at all the feedback. We decided to develop a visual resource, which we will show you in a little bit. Now, the purpose of this resource is mostly for community leaders to use to be able to start conversations around drugs and alcohol, to be able to start conversations around stigma, and we've also now extended it to our frontline workers. So we were able, unfortunately because of COVID, it did delay the rollout of the resource, but at the end of last year in December, we were able to have 2 Zoom sessions with frontline workers where we're actually able to roll out the training and the resource. And then in March, we ran 2 more sessions for our community leaders. We thought Zoom was fine for frontline workers. They've already got a background, but with community and faith leaders, we really wanted it to be face-to-face. So we ran a training. Annie Bleeker helped us develop that training. She ran the session. We did a bit of background around drugs and alcohol, provide a bit of context, and then we went into the resource. And we're going to run one of the activities that we ran with our community leaders with you a little bit later on. So, so what we provide in the resource is a user's guide. That gives you a bit of background how to use it. The set of cards, which is the illustrations, and you'll see those. We'll hand those out in a little bit. And we've also included a relevant directory for Fairfield, so all the different resources and services available to our community leaders. I guess the main thing is our intention isn't to train them to be experts in the field. The intention was to provide it's to build capacity of our community and religious leaders so that they can feel more comfortable if they're approached to have these conversations, and so that they know what services are out there so that they can refer on. So we'll move on. So you can access the digital version of this resource online. The link is there, and we're happy to share it with Abby later and email it across to everyone. It's similar to the Power of the Words resource that's online. So if you're familiar with that, it looks quite similar to that. And part of the project was also to develop a video, which we're going to show. It's going to talk a little bit more about what we've just spoken about, and you'll also get some feedback from some of the workers and community leaders that have sat through the training, and you'll get some of their feedback. So we'll play the video.
Hi, my name's Tony Maguire. I'm the Senior Community Development Officer with Alcohol and Drug Foundation. The local drug action team is managed by the ADF, or Alcohol and Drug Foundation, funded by the Australian Government. And the local drug action team are a collective of various organisations within the community. What we do, we assist and guide them with regard to applying evidence-based prevention for the community.
In 2019, there was a consultation that we conducted with community and religious leaders, frontline workers and experts working in the drug and alcohol field. We came to realization that there is a lot of stigma and shame and judgment when people from a cult community talk about drugs and alcohol.
Involvement was basically to do a consultation for the community leaders and check with them regarding the stigma, regarding the needs of the community and the ways of engaging the community in solving some of the problems that they may face and what kind of support we would be able to provide.
I was part of the consultation in 2019. We sat together and we came out with these ideas of the resources to help the community open up discussions about drug and alcohol.
So as a result of the communication that we've done with the leaders, we developed the resource, a way of support for the leaders and the community to be able to resort to it and understand how we can deal with the challenges. So part of the process was to check with the groups from the community, and we used a pilot. Once we developed the resources, we checked with the group and we ran it to see what are the reaction that we would get. The kind of reaction, the kind of problems that we may get, and to fine-tune the resources to the best development that we can provide so the community will accept it in a way that's soft and non-offending.
It's really useful resource, and the way they actually design the tools is really simple and very effective, like a tool. I think it opened up conversation with the community and with families actually in regards to accessing support.
My name is Renee Vincent and I'm from Family Drug Support. So my main role is helping families learn to cope with those that are using substances that are causing a few of those challenges. Part of our program is also helping families from different multicultural backgrounds, non-English speaking. So the resource has been a fantastic asset for Family Drug Support to try and encourage families to talk about what's going on to reduce the stigma. By using the visual cards, we're able to picture that image for them, to get them to open up and talk a little bit of what's going on in their family. When families come to group, it takes a lot of courage to even come to a group of people. The reason why this is happening is because of the shame that they do feel amongst their family members. And also different cultures experience shame and stigma differently, maybe to other families. So if we can invite them to come along to support group, they will hear other families talk about their similar stories. This in turn helps them to open up and talk, support them through their reality of what's happening.
I'm here today to attend a workshop, educate the community and increase awareness about the using of drugs and alcohol. The toolkit and the cards were amazing tools that we can use in our everyday life to deliver the right message to the community and increase awareness and get in touch and get connected with the community to help them.
Hi, my name is Claudia. I work for the Salvation Army Youth Link as a drug and alcohol case manager. I'm here today for a workshop And what I have found is that we have connected great with some of the people that were here today. It is about building stronger communities and staying connected with our communities for young people that have got drug and alcohol issues. What I found with our resource that we had was we had these really, really good cards that we could use, and they weren't explaining anything outright. It was more for interpretation for us. I'm able to use that with my young people to be able to kind of get a conversation going. It's about getting them engaged, finding out what they see about that, and then seeing where I can help and how I can guide them through things. Breaking down stigma, which is quite hard with young people, reaching out when they're vulnerable, and also making sure that we can connect families with supports as well along the way of helping these young people.
Being part of the LDAT team is a great resource because you are able to provide solutions to the community that they may not have otherwise. So being part of a partnership, many organizations are part of the team, and that to me is a great prevention, which is a lot better than the cure. However, when you are in trouble and you need cure, you still have the resource to provide.
And we would like to help you to tackle this issue and start this conversation. We all have brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, and we need help from time to time. There is no shame in asking for help.
Thank you. So we're very proud of this project. It's taken a long while to develop. We were very fortunate that we were able to get quite a decent amount of funding for the different stages of this project through the LDAT. So I guess one of the reasons we wanted to talk about LDAT today is that CDATs do a great job and they provide funding, but there's so much more work that needs to be done, and there's only so much we can do with that money. So we just wanted to show that there are other avenues for funding. There are ways that we can work with our CDATs. Pretty much most of our members from the LDAT are the CDATs, but just because of different funding streams, we've got different names. But there's definitely opportunities there. The other thing about this project is because we had quite a decent amount of funding, we were able to employ a project officer to coordinate it. However, something like this could still be done. It is quite, I guess it takes a lot of work. But really, I guess the key points that we wanted to show today is it's about talking to your community, it's about providing feedback, it's about all the things that we've heard about over the last 2 days. A little bit about engaging community leaders in Fairfield. For us, that's our bread and butter. That's the community we work with. But it's reach out to your services, reach out to the people that you know that are already working with those groups. In Fairfield, we have 5 multicultural liaison officers at Fairfield Police. So we were able to go to our different multicultural liaison officers who have contacts already, established contacts with their community leaders. And Susan and I were able to work with the other ladies to engage those community leaders. We brought Starts in as a partner because they are, their specific role is to work with refugees and trauma and torture survivors. So they also have a lot of contacts with community leaders, and they were very valuable in bringing that point of view in. So it's really about working collaboratively, not reinventing the wheel, really sort of seeing what's out there and bringing in all your resources to work together. Some of the feedback that we did get, which was a nice little side bonus, was after we rolled out the resource, our intention was for community leaders to use it, but in the end it turns out since then some of the images have been used for some of the gambling and awareness training that's been delivered in Fairfield, because again there's a lot of stigma and shame attached to that. We've had frontline workers saying that they've been able to use it with some of their clients who may have learning disabilities or other types of disabilities, because as you'll see, it's quite a visual resource. So we'll now move into the activity. So we've placed 2 cards on each table, and I think your table at the end has 3. So we have 13 cards total. So what we'll do is, in a group, we'll give you about 10 minutes, and what we'll get you to do is have a look at the images, have a conversation about them. When you get the resource, what you'll get is the image, and then on the back we've got some statements that will help prompt conversation. We haven't given you those statements today because we want you to look at it and interpret them and have a conversation about it, and then once we do that, we'll come back. So we'll leave the questions on the board. So we want you to think about what is the central message of this card and what does the image portray or evoke. And then using the card, how would you have a conversation with someone in your community about alcohol and drugs? What would you say? What advice could you give? And then we'll get you to select a spokesperson, and we'll get some feedback from each table at the end. So Susan will walk around and we'll walk around. If you get stuck or if you have questions, please feel free to ask us, and we will come back in 10 minutes. So this was one of the activities that we ran at the workshops, and we went around and we spoke with our community leaders, and it did generate quite a lot of conversations. So this is what the resource looks like. You've got the picture and you've got some talking points here. So that's to help, we find that a lot of the time the images will generate conversation on their own, but if you need some prompts, we've got some conversation starters on the side. So we'll just start going through. There we go. So which group had the first two cards? Yeah, excellent. So I'll just get someone to provide feedback around what you thought of them, what kind of conversations you had.
Over to my friend Dennis. No, I'm just messing with you. He's claiming he's got a sore throat. Exactly what she said. I asked him if he could harness the Northern Rivers and do this in 7 rhythms dance, but he just wasn't up for it. So we had the first one, and I don't have my glasses on. So we were thinking that this represents judgment and shame and active addiction and disconnection. Anything else? Table? Loneliness, isolation, alienation.
Also directed at the person and not at the substances.
Yeah, so we thought that all of the concepts or the ideas that this person had about the judgments against them was directed at them rather than the substance that they were using. So more of a personal attack. And they don't look open or being able to communicate or wanting or being able to have the resources to reach out.
Excellent. So that's pretty much what we've got on here. So this card would be used, for example, if a mother, a father, a parent, some family was to approach a community leader, they could use this image to talk to them and educate them around, that if you do make someone feel, ashamed or the stigma and all that, it's going to stop them from seeking help. So these cards aren't directed so much at users, it's more for family and general community. Some cards may be able to be used, and that's, up to everyone's discretion, but that's the context of how we would probably use this card. The second one, which is the how can I support you?
Okay, so this one we thought that the person, very similar, they look like they are feeling judged and feeling shameful. They have a very closed posture, not an open posture. And we thought that this indicated that even though that person was speaking supportive words, that there's a concept that they're actually thinking, that they're blaming the person, that it's their fault that they got into this position, etc.
Yeah, so it's again, it's about treating someone with an alcohol and other drug problem fairly, the way you want to be treated. So, I think for a lot of family members, that automatic kind of, you did this to yourself, that's a kind of a normal thought process, but it's how you then act. So that's the kind of conversations that we'd be having about being supportive. The next two cards, so who had card number 3? Yep.
So we had similar conversations just around feeling shame, isolated, those type of things. But it was also looking at her thinking that the family would, that she'd put shame on the family, and vice versa, with the family kind of going, well, I can't deal with this. Social exclusion, thank you. But we also made a point with Mark's talk yesterday. He made the point that if his wife didn't stick with him, that it may have been a completely different story. So I guess, having those conversations around inclusion and staying with them, that can make those big differences.
Yep, definitely. Thank you. And then the next card.
So looking at that as, that we're not seeing anything in the background. This is what's happening, and not being able to kind of address that elephant in the room, and what that can mean for the family as a whole, the community and the person using.
Yeah, definitely. So what we found in our communities, in a lot of our communities in Fairfield, is that fear of being judged by a community. So a lot of the time, say, oh no, my family doesn't have an issue with drugs and alcohol. We don't have an issue with gambling, for fear of being judged from the outside of the community. So that's, it's that sort of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil kind of thing. So it's the family ignoring the issue because they don't want the community to know, and how that can then lead to bigger issues, and how it's important to have these conversations. So thank you. The next two is the one with the emu with his head stuck in the sand. Who had that one? Great.
So we actually got very much into the discussion around card number 6. We didn't have much time to spend on the ostrich or emu or the bird with the head stuck in the sand, but this one's pretty clear. It's just pretending the problem doesn't exist, and having very little knowledge, and we know that knowledge is power. I remember a friend of mine, actually, a Korean fella, he got caught with, his mum found a meth pipe, and he told her, she said, what's this? And no, she found his meth, and he said it was marijuana, and she grounded him, and he was 18, which was interesting. But just not having any idea of what it is or what it does, and pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and we find that there's, what we're sort of seeing in Fairfield is that there's a big disconnect between parents and young people. A lot of our new arrivals, non-English speakers, young people pick up the language faster, they pick up technology faster, and parents get left behind. So a lot of the times, like your story, Nick, parents have no idea what's going on. So it's about education, and sort of not sticking your head in the sand. We'll go on to card 6. You said you had quite a...
Polydrug use. There's been a number of implements, and that's shown in even the previous ones. And sometimes people think it's a drug issue, it's an alcohol issue, but they don't see that there's also issues about people using lots of things at once. And trying to understand one thing is hard enough, but trying to understand the impact of 3 different things is much more complicated.
Definitely. And in some of the cards that we've got coming up, there's more images of alcohol and different things, and we'll talk about those ones a little bit more, but that's a good point. Thank you.
Card number 6. We had a lot with this one. So, where are my dot points? So we had the idea of a soccer coach as a bit of a surrogate. So it doesn't have to be, a parent or an uncle or someone. It could be someone in the community who's seen as a leader, who can have a conversation that a parent or a teacher might not be able to have. Not sure if this is a coach, but where we went from there was, if these are parents, then these are opportunities to have these discussions. Whereas, the confrontational, sit down, I need to talk to you about alcohol and drugs, might not really work. And just having something where people are in the moment, they're doing an activity which they might enjoy, and they do enjoy, then that's a great time to open up those conversations. Also, non-threatening environments, like the car, just cruising along, just having a chat, kind of segues into alcohol and other drugs and things like that. or the discussion thereof. And yeah, also just soccer and fitness just as, showing that as very much the antithesis of where AOD can lead, and having people moving their bodies, being engaged, being connected. So and potentially opening up conversations around some of their heroes and where that may have led, like Maradona, for example. So.
Yeah. And I guess this card's a really good example of, the intention behind this card was around the first point. So it's about having casual conversations. It doesn't need to be confrontational. But the second point you made about sport is not something that we'd thought of. So what we've found is that every time someone picks up the card, they interpret it different and they pick out different things, which has been great because it leads to more conversations. But yeah, this card is really just about having open conversations, not having to be formal. As a youth worker, some of the best conversations I had was, driving a young person somewhere, or, I'd be cooking in the kitchen, preparing for drop-in, and some kids would come in and we'd have some really great conversations. So it's about taking those opportunities and being open. So thank you for that. We will go to the next card. So who's got the next two?
So with the first card, we've found there's a whole lot of negative language and stigma around addiction. So with those words that are up on the board, there's junkie, alcoholic, loser. It's already that negative impact and look on the person. And the visual there just shows the person, they're shut off, they're not engaging, they're not involved in, just the general communication that we normally would be.
Yeah, so with this card, we found it was important to put it in. And when Annie Bleeker ran the workshop, she also looked at the power of words. With our families, as I've mentioned, a lot of them don't speak English or speak English as a second language. So words like junkie, alcoholic, it's quite common for them to use those words without really understanding the negative impact that it has. So we found it was really important to educate our community leaders so that they can educate families around, the harm of negative language. And that was sort of the whole purpose of this card. So thank you. And we'll move on to the next one.
So yeah, that would be the one in the middle. So we took that as just how many people it affects. It's not just the person themselves who's affected by addiction or the circumstances they're in. The visual shows the multiculturalism that's evident in Australia at the moment. But also it links back to what Mark's speech yesterday was about, that it can happen to anyone. Doesn't matter where you're from, or you can be high achieving, highly successful, and it'd still be affected.
Definitely, and that's exactly what we wanted to show through this one, and just to normalise getting help and seeking support, and that it can happen to anyone. So we'll move on to the next one because I'm aware that we're starting to run out of time. Who had the one with the crocodile in the middle? I know there was a lot of discussion about the crocodile.
So yeah, we had the one with the crocodile in the middle. We were a little bit confused at first, but then we kind of got like that whole yellow sign as like a danger kind of sign, like a warning. And then it's all these images of like even cigarettes, alcohol and drugs. And so it's kind of like associating all these symbols with this danger symbol. So it's like kind of easy to understand even for like kids. It did take us a while to get it though, but whatever. But yeah, it's just associating all of these things with the danger symbol. And it's kind of similar with the next one as well. We did the next one too. Yeah, there it is. So it's like the alcohol bottle, and then it's all like these scenarios. So like a car crash or like parents fighting. So it's kind of like this image in the middle can lead to all of these other images around it. So it's like a knock-on kind of effect, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so we found that it was important to highlight that just because something is legal, it doesn't mean that it's good for you. So a lot of our community members think, alcohol's legal, it's not bad. Same with tobacco, same with the shisha. It's very normalised in a lot of cultures within our community. Families will gather. It's a social thing. Our community leaders were quite shocked to find out what the harms of using a shisha were. and they also had no idea that alcohol causes more harm than any other drugs in our community. So that was really important to highlight that just because something's legal, it doesn't mean that it's good for you or it's not going to cause harm. So that's what those 2 cards were about. And we'll move on to the last table. You had 3, so...
We did, and we had so many conversations about it. So the second one that's up on the screen, we talked about it being that conversation about how alcohol is quite damaging for your physical body. And also one of Nathaly said here that they're kind of long-term effects more than instant effects. It's kind of that more degenerative that alcohol does to your body. We also thought that maybe it could be a point of discussion about like sport and activity and how you like to move your body or what physical health means to you. Does anyone want to add anything else? We'll move on to the next one, which was a favourite of our table because it feels like there's hope, that really hoping element. And also what the table really loved about this card was that it could be a talking point actually with the client. And also the different stages that are represented. There's so much symbology in this, the question mark, my colleague also said, the stairs, small steps. I also noticed in this, it could also not just be about alcohol, but it could be about mental illness. So it can open up other conversations about other really stigmatized topics within community.
Yeah, definitely. We just wanted to show that where you are right now is not where you have to end up. And it's really about hope, whether you're a user or whether you're a family member. It's really about kind of saying with the right support and the right services, you could do anything. So, yeah, thank you. And just the last one.
You guys conveyed that very well in all of the imagery. It's been awesome. This last one, I think might have been the first one we talked about. We loved the multicultural representation in it and also the androgynous of the young person at the front. Like if you're a male or a female, you could identify or see yourself in that character, and just applause to that. Loved it. And the way that the people aren't actually talking to each other, but then there's these talking points to encourage that connectivity, kind of represents this community that's a little bit separated or isolated from each other, but then these talking points that will actually bring them together. Does anyone want to say anything else about that image?
Excellent. Thank you so much. So those are the 13 cards for the resource. As you can see, there's certain themes and discussion points that carry throughout. We're now at the stage where we're evaluating the project and considering what we're going to apply for our next LDAT round. So what we'll do is we'll meet with the LDAT working group first. At the workshops that we ran with community leaders, we did ask some questions at the end to sort of get some feedback and see where to from here. Do we add more images and more themes to the resource? Do they want other types of resources? So that's a conversation that we'll be having with our community. And then based on those consultations, we will then decide how we move forward with our next LDAT project. But I'll just get Natasha to wrap up a few things.
So just with the resource, we will provide some hard copies. I will pass my contact details to Abby, if you can share with everyone. If you wanted a hard copy, we can post that out to you. But with the cards, because every time we run these workshops, we learn so much, and it's just the art of interpretation as well. It's really good to hear new things that come from the cards. So we hope that you can also use it with your CDATs or your communities or your clients and really just adapt the directory of services within the toolkit. So I'll just quickly run through some of the themes and discussion points, but I'm going to quickly run through this because we've already kind of touched upon them. But from our consultations, the main issues and themes to emerge were shame. So with those first few cards, that's what we really looked at unpacking. The second theme was stigma. The third theme was judgment. And denial was our last. So what we found was a lot of our community and faith leaders were saying, oh, this issue doesn't exist in our community. We don't really talk about drug and alcohol. So the toolkit is really to be that conversation starter and actually have conversations around drug and alcohol. And we've shared this with our leaders as well as how you can support. So try to listen. Sometimes people find it difficult to acknowledge that they have a problem, and we can continue to be supportive by showing that we care and that we are there for them. Also the importance of open communication. So as Nat mentioned, we did reference the power of words and language matters tools as well. So just having that open communication and making sure that the language that we are using is positive, and what to use and what not to use. The last two cards as well covered that information and education, and then they've got the directory and the glossary as well that provides a bit more information around alcohol and other drugs. So this is just about some stuff, what you can do to support. So think about what you would like to say before you respond, because using negative language may worsen feelings of shame and judgment. Use positive language and try not to blame the person for their situation. Use I statements and show unconditional support, as this helps people feel included and more open to asking for help. And we've got about 6 minutes for questions. So I'll just open the floor if anyone had any questions around the project.
Have you translated these into other languages?
No, we haven't. We did have this discussion with the LDAT, and we're thinking, do we translate them? We thought if we make the cards as simple and interpretive as possible, we wouldn't need to translate. Oh, sorry, you don't have to look.
We found that a lot of the community leaders that we're working with and the workers that we're working with, so the people that we were training on how to use the resource, already speak enough English to be able to understand it. And then they will take the images and they will have these conversations in English or in their language, in whatever language they choose. We found that because Fairfield is so multicultural and there's so many languages, if we start translating, we'll never finish. Having said that, we do translate a lot of our materials, but because this was very visual, we tried to make it as simple as possible so that we didn't need to do that translation.
And we're also in the process of putting together a video. So we did interview some community and religious leaders saying key messages from the toolkit, like it's important, it's okay to seek support, and it's okay to talk about drug and alcohol in your community. And they've spoken that in their own language, so we're going to share that with the community. So we've got about 4 different languages that are captured in that video that kind of summarise the themes from the toolkit.
Yeah. Awesome. I could definitely see it becoming a almost pocket guide that parents could use. So that's why I was asking if it was translated, it'd be perfect for families and things, but it is progress.
That's feedback, that's great. And if we find that more people are using it in that way and that there's a need to translate, then there is that option to apply for more funding through the LDAT or through other avenues to look at translating it. So, thank you.
Anna, here.
I'm interested to know, what was the starting point for the consultation process? When you brought all these people in the room together from the community leaders, what did you ask them as a starting point? Did you have in mind, I want to produce a resource kit, or did that come from them? Where did the things come from? What was that process?
Yeah. Do you want me to go? Yeah. So with the consultation, what we wanted to do is kind of come in with no agenda. So we were hearing around the community, community and faith leaders aren't talking about drug and alcohol. It is quite taboo. So there was that existing barrier already, but we wanted to come into the consultation and say, what are the issues you're facing in your community? So really unpack that. We didn't have the idea of the visual resource toolkit, that came about after, and it is modelled from a resource that the Safe Families toolkit that was developed as part of the Fairfield Domestic Violence Committee. So they developed a very similar toolkit, but it looks around issues around DV. So that's where the idea came. We knew that that worked really well in that space. So once we did the consultation and leaders said, we want to know more about local support services, we want to know how to have these conversations, that's when we thought a visual toolkit would work really well with CAL communities. But we made sure once we developed the resource toolkit to actually pilot it and say, is this what you expected? Is this addressing the key issues that you raised? Is there anything else we can add to it? So we did ensure that consultation process throughout as well, just to make sure that we haven't produced something that doesn't work at all or isn't what they've asked for.
Yeah, so we approached Starts and Core, and then through their existing women's groups and men's groups, we were able to pilot the project that way. Yeah.
My question was almost preempted by Josh's, because I come from rural New South Wales, and I was wondering about interpreters. We have a very mixed community as well, lots of different cultures, and I was wondering about interpreters. You've talked about having some of the materials translated, and the visuals are quite clear. Sometimes, as you said, the children their English is much better than their parents, and I can see that the young people could perhaps work through those and explain to their parents. So I just needed to explain my question.
That's it. So because Fairfield's so multicultural, we do have a lot of bilingual workers. We have access to interpreters. Fairfield's got 5 multicultural liaison officers. I speak Spanish, Susan speaks Arabic, Assyrian, some other dialects. Some of the other ladies speak Vietnamese, Thai. So we're quite lucky in the area that we do have interpreters, and when we don't, we access things like TIS, so the online interpreting service. So that's a really good way. If you're struggling to communicate with language, that's a really great way to access language as well. Yeah. Sorry, there was a question.
Yeah, no, so I'm from Wagga, and we've got a fairly big multicultural community down there, and I personally feel that there's not enough information or education to the refugees that come into our country. So something like this would be great. If I was to kind of pick this up and take it back, would I be able to do that, or would there be like further training needed for me to?
With this resource, for frontline workers, so someone like yourself, we're quite happy for you to take the resource and run with it. It's quite self-explanatory. For our community leaders, it's important that they go through that training. So we worked with Annie Bleeker, and she was great. So she was able to provide some drug and alcohol information, provide a bit of context, and give our community leaders that education around drugs and alcohol, and then teach them to use the resource. So if you're a frontline worker, you work in the space, it's quite easy to pick up and run with it. But if you are wanting to get community leaders involved and then have them use the resource, we do recommend, even if, like I know Wagga, you might have 2 people, so you're not going to put on a full training. Even if you were to sit with them and kind of walk them through it, then that should be fine. Yeah.
Happy for you to take that as well.
Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Has it been utilised for schools? I think it's a great resource for educating principals and teachers who are in denial that there's major issues happening within their communities, particularly those where there's different cultures and they don't want to rock the boat. Has this been trialled or utilised in any school situation?
Not that I'm aware of. We have had some youth workers use it throughout their sort of work. It is something Natasha and I go to the principals' forums every 3 months, so it is something that we can take to the schools and just make them aware of. But yeah, what we're finding is that there's a lot more uses for it than what we actually originally planned for. So that's definitely a space that it could be used.
And we are looking at rolling out some more workshops. We had very positive feedback from frontline workers. We've trained over 100 frontline workers and about 30 community and faith leaders. But now we're looking to continue rolling those workshops out and involving schools as well.
Mm-hmm. I guess the other thing is, if you think that this is something that you'd want to roll out in your area and deliver the training, we're quite happy to put you in touch with Annie. I'm not too sure what the cost would be because we worked with her and that included developing the resource and the training. The training's now been developed. So, if you've got some funding and you want to put on some training for some workers or community leaders, let us know. We're quite happy to sort of put you in touch with Annie for the actual facilitation part and work with you to print the resources and do all that as well. Yeah. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You've been great for being the last presentation, so thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time. Nathaly, I don't know where you think you're going, mate. You got a bucket hat coming. Just while we're waiting for Abby to grab the gifts for our lovely presenters, you know, one of the biggest takeaways from that was, for me, just a picture. It says 1,000 words, and it's just so, just bang. As soon as you see it, it gets the mind thinking, and it's cross-cultural. It's applicable for anyone. And I'm just keen to hear from the audience. What was your biggest takeaway from that presentation? Anyone?
I just have to say, from a personal perspective and as a parent, just being able to identify the drugs and the alcohol, I think that is an awesome resource for any parent, as well as, you know, other people working in the community. So I think that was a really good addition to it.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Up the back.
Just taking advantage of the opportunity to sit down and talk with your teenagers. Like, if, for example, that driving home. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I actually just think the conversation itself was actually probably the biggest thing that came from that. It actually really opened up this whole table and what we were talking about and the different perceptions and stuff. So I thought that was my biggest takeaway. Beautiful.
Thank you. And I think Abby's ready to rock and roll with some bucket hats.
I've been waiting for these green hats. Do I have the CDAT button on the right way?
Yeah. Oh wait, hang on.
Is it wrong?
True.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause one more time.